we are officially at 12 o'clock, and I know there'll be more people joining, but let me just welcome you to our panel discussion on the ROI of coaching. It's great to have you with us. It's great to have wonderful ladies with us who have experienced coaching from different perspectives. So we're really looking forward to hearing from them. I'm going to ask everyone else, if possible, just to mute yourself and let's use the chat. And anything that comes to mind as we discussed today, please chat in the chat box. It doesn't have to be a question. It can be an observation or something you've experienced from your side. That would be wonderful. And thanks for sharing where everyone is. We've got people from all geographies. So the ROI of coaching. Why did we at WICCI decide to talk about this? WICCI being the Women's India Chamber of Commerce and Industry, a voluntary organization, which I'm part of, which one of our panel members is part of, and also Pooja, who's also here from WICCI Coaching Council, is part of. It's something that comes up very often. I'm a coach. Organizations want to know, what am I going to get in return for investing in coaching? And over about the past 20, 25 years, we've seen a growth in coaching. So there is something that, obviously attracts organizations and people to be coached. We're just going to delve a bit deeper into the value. Let's look at this from the value of coaching. And also, is there an ROI? Is there an ROI that can be measured? And what's the best way to measure the ROI of coaching? So I'm going to be doing less talking. That's really enough from me, apart from posing the questions to our wonderful panel. And I'm going to jump in and just take it in alphabetical order, which is quite tricky because we've got three Ps, three perfect Ps on our panel today. But I'm going to start with Parul. If you could introduce yourself, Parul, and share a bit about your career journey, and also, one important experience for you from coaching. That would be absolutely wonderful.
Perfect. Thanks, Andrea. So, just to quickly introduce myself, I've been working for about 18 years now and part of the BD sales team at Genpact. Have done different roles through my journey. Actually, I started working when I was in college, so I was fairly young, and managed to do roles in operations, training, program management, and now in the UK in a sales and business development role. Coaching for me, I think it basically helped me or nudged me to step out of the limitations I had created for myself, in my own world. And in a way, it sort of helped me see the other areas I could leverage and bring about in my career. So I think that for me was the value I got from coaching. And yeah. So over to Praneeth.
Thanks, Parul. So I've been in the field of HR now for about 23 years. I always hesitate to say that because it makes me feel really old. But worked across multiple industries. That's been one of my specific, desires to keep pushing myself out of my comfort zone and, testing myself in different industries. So that's, it's been a wonderful journey just looking at, different industries from airlines to technology to banking. And, currently I'm with a medical device company and, absolutely, loving looking at, an HR professional's career through different lenses, different industries. From a coaching perspective, I think what has really, helped me is, I think taking that pause. We often don't take that pause and, step out of yourself and then look at yourself. It's also helped me a lot with self-belief. And I think a lot of us as women leaders sometimes doubt, whether we can actually do those bigger jobs and, if we can really, and I think it's helped with a lot of self-belief because when you talk to a coach, one really kind of, hears about the fact that that is the most common thing. And, you're not the only one feeling like that. So I think for me, it's really been those two that coaching has really helped with. Over to Prasiddha.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Prasiddha. I've been in the field of marketing and communications now for about 16 years. I wanted to emphasize on 16 because Praneeth just said that 23 makes her feel old. Been across, I think, both sides, worked on the agency side for the first half of my career with one of the largest PR agencies, then spent some time on the startup side, and now work for a company in the company which is in the medical and healthcare tech space. So it's been a really exciting journey. I think starting with at a completely junior level and then kind of moving through the ladder and reaching where I am today. And I think if I were to specifically talk about coaching, I think it has really helped me be self-aware. And at the same time, help me build my confidence. In my career, when I was introduced to coaching, that was a time when, overnight, because of certain scenarios, I moved into a leadership role with a lot changing around me. My peers had become people who were reporting into me, and I had to suddenly kind of change gears and work in a very different environment and in a very different manner. And having the support of a coach really helped me understand my strengths. And somewhere I agree with Praneeth, it also kind of brings in a lot of self-belief, because sometimes people around you see your potential and have that faith and trust in you, but then you always let the negative chatter affect you, and you're very, very critical. I'm saying, I do believe that everybody here would agree that somewhat we are very critical of ourselves, and I think it's about women too. I think in the process of multitasking, in the process of being the perfectionist everywhere, we get into that phase, and having somebody who's coming with an outside-in perspective and who's kind of listening in and kind of helping you understand your strengths and also how to overcome your weaknesses. It really is something which is a life-changing experience, at least for me. So yeah, that's me.
So thanks, ladies, and thanks for sharing some of the things that resonated with you from coaching, from building the self-belief to transitioning and so on into different roles at a time of great change. I'm really curious, because sometimes when we look back on our career and we think, when should I have had a coach and I didn't? I'm going to ask Praneeth to kick off here, if that's okay, and then you just pass it around to each other. Is that okay? Thanks.
Sure, thanks. One of my, I think, real pivotal points in my career was, after I had my first kid, I had multiple changes in my life. So I had my first, maternity break from my organization, never been a mom. And during my maternity break, I ended up getting a job that was pretty much, 2 levels above what I had operated at. So, I'd operated as a number 2, country HR person, 1 down to the CHRO. And I suddenly got this job, which was a regional HR head without ever even being, at a country head level. So, I skipped that. I was, an outsider to that industry. I was the youngest person in the team. I was the only newcomer in that leadership team and the only female. So, it was just many, many, many firsts. And I regret that I never used a coach, because I think I was dealing with so much adversity around, in myself about, how am I managing all these changes. I remember coming back my first day from work and I went to the loo and I cried because I wondered, I'd left my kid at home for the first time and, joining a whole new workplace. Nobody embraces you with open arms on day one, right? So I think that really, really was a very uphill climb for me. And when I look back, I wish I had been proactive. It's only 5 years into that role that I actually went and hired a coach for myself, because, I'd reached a point where I was in a bind and I needed some outside help to get out of, of a certain circumstance and a situation. But what I did, I changed about myself is, when I got into the role I'm in currently, I signed up a coach even before joining this new company. And I said, let me do it right. And let me make sure that I'm much more proactive. And, you're not waiting for, for a problem. You're not waiting for a challenge to actually get a coach. You should, I think that's been my learning, to be much more proactive about it. And I learned that lessons this time around.
So what you're saying is just one point there. It doesn't have to be a challenging time.
Yes.
Be proactive. Yeah, lovely. Go on, Praneet. Who are you handing over to?
Prasidha?
Yeah, I think it was very, in my recent past, there was a situation where, at a company level, there are a lot of important decisions that you take, which is very important for the business. But then sometimes as individuals, those are not decisions that you always agree with or resonate with. Sometimes just due to emotional reasons, sometimes because you just don't understand the larger context. And in situations like that, you either start judging yourself and thinking, if you are if you're not aligned with the mission anymore, or mind to understanding the larger context. And then sometimes on the other side, also you worry being judged, right? Especially because, again, there is an unconscious bias, and there is always this perception about women being emotional, and therefore, coming up with a perspective, trying to always be the conscience keeper of the organization. And there is that struggle and that battle. And I think when you're going through a situation like that, it feels that I should have probably gotten support and had somebody to discuss it with, and just get a sense of is this something that is maybe it's perfect and it's correct, but if it's just not resonating with me as a person, does it mean that I should have taken a decision or done something differently? And I'm talking in terms of my own career and well-being. Versus kind of dealing with that situation, not being able to sleep at night, kind of always being worried about it, trying hard to keep everybody around you motivated while you're yourself in that zone where you're questioning everything that you're doing. So I do totally regret not having done that. But yeah, I'm very encouraged by what Praneet said. I've now started at a new place. It's just been 2 months. I think now's the right time to get some help. Before problems even come up, so that the baggage from the past does not affect and impact the way you conduct yourself, and you're able to kind of look at this new opportunity with a fresh pair of eyes and just develop and grow into it, as well as a person. Parul.
Yeah, I think the point you've made on baggage is very, very important. My introduction to coaching happened when I was actually leveraging a lot of my support network with my mentors and my sponsors at work. And then is when I realized, or I had a sense that my mentors were, and because the organization was going through a lot of change and there was a lot of insecurity at the senior level within my organization, I felt that some of it was, I was being used in a way, or influenced in a way to be for a situation to be advantageous to them. I wasn't getting an independent perspective, which I thought at that time was more important for me, and hence to sort of step away from the work environment and to sort of get involved and work with somebody who would get an independent view, maybe help me find the insight I was looking for within myself. I thought at that time a coach was the right person I could speak to. And also there was a theme within what I was working on, which focused maybe more than just the work or the career aspect. And I felt that piece I could have worked, maybe I would have worked with a coach earlier than I did. So for me, that was part of a significant part of the journey, at least I've had as a person, not just in my career, but also in my personal life.
Lovely. So look, it's great. This is a self-running panel. I've got nothing to do. But you bring up a lot of points. So I think we'll go back to later. A lot of the points about women and the things that go on in, particularly, I know it goes on in men's brains too. I don't want to make this a gender issue, that, that what's going on. Am I being overly emotional? Am I overthinking? Am I multitasking too much? But there's a point that Parul made there around, the different roles that we're all encouraged to seek help from, like the mentor, the sponsor. The coaches could be an internal coach, obviously, but often that's also an external role. Like you said, Parul would have been really helpful. But I'm going to turn to Praneet now, because, you know, Parul mentioning mentoring and sponsoring, I'd really like to get your perspective on how each of those roles can best add value in an organization, and also to, you know, maybe start with the organization perspective.
Sure. You know, when I look at the three roles, I think they have three distinct, you know, offerings and responsibilities, you know, towards the individual. If you think about coaching, it's more, as Parul said, the independent voice. And I personally would think, and you know, that's been my experience, that coaching has been much more helpful when transitioning from, you know, one level to another. When you're really looking for independence, you're looking for, you know, a lot more than just the organizational context, where you're really growing into a far bigger role, you know. So whether you're transitioning within an organization to a bigger role, transitioning, you know, maybe to, you know, totally different organization, but getting, you know, a little more broader perspective. I also feel a coach is somebody who can help you contextualize also, you know, the challenges you face within the organization by using confidential 360s, things like that, you know. So it's not totally independent, but, you know, somebody who can really be your confidant and someone who can really help you grow and reflect and introspect and, you know, kind of, you know, catch your untapped potential and, you know, redirect you there. When it comes to a mentor, I feel it's more about checking in, you know, it's the checking in on how am I doing within the context, you know, of my role. And I'm speaking from an organizational perspective, because obviously there are mentors we all have outside of the organizations as well. But, you know, when I think about a mentor, it's more about, you know, checking in, how am I doing, you know, nudge me in the right direction. You know, here's a kind of, you know, challenge I've had. How would you, you know, help me look at it differently? So I think more contextual in the moment, that's been, you know, my experience. It's worked really well for me, and, you know, for some of the colleagues that, you know, I've encouraged to use mentors for. And also somebody who really kind of, you know, isn't directly in your line of sight. So a mentor should be somebody who's a little further away, but still has sight of your universe, not somebody completely independent. So they're able to, you know, give you, you know, those little nuggets about how to, you know, help you navigate around the organization or your role. When it comes to a sponsor, I think it's really about somebody who cheerleads for you, who opens doors for you in an organization, helps you navigate, connects the dots, you know, helps you get new roles, the person who will be the champion, who will, you know, kind of vouch for you. You know, there are companies which have really formal, you know, promotion processes at senior levels. You know, these are those people who really help set you up and make you, you know, kind of look good and, you know, tap you in the right direction. So if I was to summarize the three roles, I'm trying to find a catchphrase, but, you know, I think the sponsor really is, you know, kind of the navigator. You know, they navigate you through the right steps in the organization. If I think of the mentor, it's more the you know, how do I put that, not the cheerleader, but, you know, the person who, you know, the nudger in terms of, you know, right, kind of switching you in the right place. And then the coach, I'd say, is the confidant, who really helps you open up and, you know, explore areas about yourself that you didn't know existed. That's how I would sum up those three.
Yeah, thanks, Praneet. I know we're in danger of going into the roles of mentoring and sponsoring. I'm just going to ask, Parul, actually, because you brought it up, about mentoring and sponsoring, just to kind of wrap this segment. What's your advice for women, you know, how to get a good mentor, how to get a good sponsor, if it's not ingrained in the culture?
Okay, yeah. So my view, because I've always had either a support or a mentor or a coach within my support group, and I do genuinely think they are part of your support network. The best way to reach out to a wider set of people is to sign up for projects and programs outside your core area or your responsibility. For example, when I was in operations, I did sign up for a program at the organization level to influence senior people issues, and when I say people issues, I more mean how to bring about balance. And that was an important theme within our senior management. And that put me in and I worked closely with not just Genpact HR team. I also worked closely with external consultants, and very organically. You don't have to do it because, oh, I want to make this person my mentor or this person my sponsor. It happens very organically when you work on such programs. You interact with people, and then you choose one or two of them who resonate, and you start talking to them about, okay, this is what I'm observing. And getting that independent view. And as Praneeth very rightly said, it's important to have these people not right in the line of your work, but are in your universe, either at work or outside. So in my view, I would do that. I would maybe sign up for a program which at the organization level does not have to be in operations. In my case, another program I did was in sales and business development, where I signed up for a very large deal we were chasing. We lost the deal, but the guy who was running the deal, who was next in line to the CEO, he remembered, and we kept in touch. So I would say that's the best way to engage people informally, and then build your network of your support network.
Fantastic. And I love how you brought in, you're not doing it because you're going to win. You're doing it, you hope you're going to win, but you're building those connections because you believe in something. It's genuine, it's authentic, and you just don't know what's going to come next. And to that point, resilience. I'm going to be there for the next one. And there is a slight plug for the WICCI Resilience and Coaching for Resilience that is coming up tomorrow at 7 p.m. So thanks for that, Parul. I'm going to kind of shift gears a bit now and land Prasida with a bit of a question, which, Prasida coming from the marketing discipline where, there's a lot of measurement, and the topic is around the return on investment of coaching. And, from a marketing perspective, we look at the lifetime value. What's the lifetime value of this relationship and this product? You could think of coaching as a product. So, look, Prasida, you've been exposed to coaching. Could you talk to, the lifetime value of coaching? Does it end? Is there a cumulative effect? What's your perspective?
Sure. I mean, absolutely. It has a cumulative and a long-term effect on you as an individual, the way you look at your career. In fact, even the way you look at, the opportunities you want to pursue in the future. So I think that the lifetime value of coaching is definitely infinite. But I do want to also flag that it also depends upon how your relationship with your coach was and to what level were you engaged and invested in, both ways. And I think that becomes very, very critical when you kind of, create that network that Parul was talking about, whether it's of mentors, coaches, or, getting that sponsor. Some of it has to be organic and it will be organic. But I think it becomes very important for you to also understand if that chemistry exists and, how are you both as individuals being able to communicate very openly. And I think that's very, very important, because if you're not being able to be open to your coach, then you're not leveraging that relationship the way Praneeth mentioned. Like, the coach has to be your confidant. There should be that relationship where it's not only one area of, oh, okay, I need to have more gravitas in the way I present myself or my executive presence, and their coach help me with it. But that will not happen unless the coach understands you as a person, your personality, your career history, the kind of situations you've gone through, all of which has led to you being who you are today. So I think investing in that relationship is step one for that relationship to have that long-term lifetime value, so to say. So yeah, but if I were to talk about my personal experience, yes, absolutely. I think I still go back to my notes from those days, especially when I'm dealing with a certain situation or a challenge, and I kind of think about it. Am I going back to where I was? Like, what am I missing out on? And you also land up having a lot of respect for the organization that invested in you and actually got you that support system. So I think, it's something which is going to stay with you. You know, it will stay with you, but your success is in your hands. So how much you make this relationship work, you are responsible for it. And that's the only time the coach will be able to help you.
So thank you for pointing that out. You're in charge of the relationship, and that you'll always, you'll have a feeling for the organization that, provided you with coaching. So I'm just going to turn to Praneet now, as someone who invests a lot in people development. How do you feel? You invest in people and they grow, and then either they move on to another part of the organization or they leave the organization. Talk us through that.
I think, there's definitely a benefit for both, so while I think on the face of it, it seems obvious that, the individual gains a lot more from coaching than the organization. I don't think that's true, because in the long term, if you think of the game, the Lincoln logs, right? The game that our kids used to play, all the logs build up together and they link in together. So I think eventually, the two kind of always meet. What I found, most valuable about, whether it's a lifetime return on coaching or, what's the organization's gain from it. I found, 2-3 areas specifically of value. When you really want to bring it down to more, kind of tangible outcomes and visible outcomes. I think one for me, an important, point is, when leaders are in transition. And, when you have, assimilation programs and, there's feedback gathered from teams and stakeholders, and, whether that's done via your coach internally or externally, I think there's a lot of value in the individual getting that independent feedback. You often, if you sat one-to-one with people, they're never as candid as if they were to actually sit with your coach and tell them, here's, one thing I wish, Praneet could do differently, or, here's some feedback. So I think, that it really helps in a successful transition. I think that's one value I've really seen. I think the other one for me is engagement, how you lead your teams, how you engage as a more authentic leader, how you bring your own style to the table. I think a coach can really help you to find that, to find, who are you as a leader, and really help you, make that connection and, be more effective. And I think it translates, at some level as a lifetime benefit, I would say, even to an organization, the lifetime of the leader, at least, that you'll have people stick to them. You'll have people, hang around, you'll have people retained, inspired, and then they go on to do great things commercially and, culturally. And then the other piece I found a lot of value is, when we do our succession planning, I found a lot of value in seeing people progress closer and closer to their readiness levels for the next role. So, I think those really have been some experiences I've had, in investing at different points. And not all investments have to be like, the traditional coaching arrangement. If you've got, a first-time manager, I think an internal investment, it doesn't need to be a external one. An internal, manager could be a good person who'd nudge, a first-time leader. And then, you'd have an external coach maybe for, leader in transition, where there's more independence, and to the point Parul made earlier, you need, sometimes when people already have an impression of you in an organization, you need that independent voice. So I think those are definitely the 2-3 places I've really seen significant value. And a last one that I would add is, when we talk about talent pools, right? When one kind of talks about, how do you build, who has potential, how do you build it? It's not always very obvious, who that talent pool is going to be. You could look at performance. It's not always a direct indicator, but I think coaching relationships really help bring out and help people shine. So you as an organization can direct your investments and efforts in the direction where you're seeing the results of coaching. And some of it might be longer term, but I do think these are multi-year plans. These are not things you see in 6 months or 1 year. And, I think companies and individuals need to think of this as a multi-year investment, not a single time, one-time shot.
So yeah, and we'll come back to that point because you make some really important points about how coaching can be used in the organization, and the value that that delivers to the organization over time. So we're going to talk about that in the last part when we really get into the ROI of coaching. And thank you, Sharon, that's a fantastic question. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. I do want Parul from the heart now. Parul from the heart, gut reaction. Who gets more value from a coaching engagement, you or the organization?
Okay, so the way it works is for the first 3 to 6 months, it is the individual. So in the short term, I would say it is the individual. And in my view, at the root of all coaching is effort to change and sustained change. Yeah. In my mind, after the first 3 to 6 months, especially, it depends on the topic the coachee has selected. If there are elements of it which impact a larger team, the person themselves sort of start feeling a change in them, and it sort of percolates to their team. So, for example, when I was leading a large team in India, before taking this role, I did see, as I was getting coached on balance, I did see I had far more respect for my team members wanting balance in their life. And so it sort of became a team theme, and it sort of defined the culture of our team. We all wanted to work towards better balance. Rather than being workhorses. So I think it does impact the organization. It just takes a little bit longer for it to show.
So obviously, was the organization happy with you having more balance and not being such a workhorse?
Yeah, I do believe that. I think I was able to, at least I can say I was able to attract a lot of good talent in my team. And I also got the opportunity to move to the UK because of some of the themes in balance, element of balance, So it just links. And in my mind, looking at it from a view of numbers or ROI is absolutely unfair. I think it is absolutely unfair. Tangible ROI, I think it is something where you can feel a difference. For example, when we were part of a group defining the budget for, do we want coaching in our budget for next year within the organization? The first year we had, when we voted as a group, we had a few naysayers. Actually, we were split half, but we still decided to go ahead with it. And the next year, when we had the same budget discussion, there was no naysayer. Everybody wanted it. But having said that, I looked at one of the questions on the chat. I've not waited for organizations to sponsor a coach for me. I've had a coach independent of the organization. I've also leveraged a coach on my own. So I've seen a lot of value come of it.
So great, thanks Parul for that, and for sharing, jumping the gun there on the ROI and being very adamant that no, we can't measure it. So we'll come to that in a moment. But Prasita, also Praneet and Parul talked about how is coaching used in the organization. Is it integrated? Do we have it independently? Do we find our own coach? What's your thought, in terms of looking at the organization as a whole? Do you think coaching can be standalone, or is it more effective, for example, if the whole, leadership team goes through the coaching together? What do you think about that?
In my opinion, I think while organizations can probably opt for those kind of coaching systems, to my mind and in my experience, I think it's about that one-on-one connect and how leaders identify and engage with their coaches. So the preference from my perspective will always to have those independent relationships. I do also sense that, there has to be that comfort level, which I spoke about earlier as well. So investing in those relationships at an individual level to me works better versus like a group kind of a setup, which might make sense to an organization from a cost perspective. And Praneeth would probably be able to put more light into that. But I think from an individual's perspective, having that independent relationship works much better. Also going to the example that Parul shared, I think even now there is a sense, and barring a few organizations which are evolved enough to understand the importance of coaching and kind of invest in it, I don't think a lot of young organizations think about it. In fact, I do know that in a lot of young organizations, even if somebody at a senior level is getting help, they wouldn't talk about it. Like it is something which is the secretive weapon, which is lying somewhere, and they're using it as and when they need, but they don't talk about it. And they feel that saying that, oh, I learned this from my coach, or I was discussing this with my coach, that's not going to come out that often. People will still be comfortable talking dinner table conversations versus anything they learn from their coach. So that change is also something which has to come in. I don't think it's come in a lot of organizations. Many of us have worked and work with organizations that are multinationals, and I think that's how we got introduced to the concept and kind of have now taken it along wherever we go because of how much we've valued the whole experience. But that change has to come in. It doesn't exist now, which is also the other factor to keep in mind when organizations are kind of investing in getting a coach for their leaders, whether in a group setting or otherwise.
I think you make some really important points. I am a coach and I've worked for many years and worked with various organizations, and I see that, some organizations, they're jealous if they know their senior leaders got a coach, because that shows that they're on the, fast track and they're going to be developed and so on. And others, it's kind of, don't tell anyone, but I've got a coach, keep it secret. So thanks for that, Prasida. That's really important. And I'm going to ask Praneeth now. So how do you integrate coaching most effectively into organizations? Because, there's billions of dollars spent on coaching around the world, but there's many more billions of dollars spent on formal programs or visible leadership programs. So, share what do you think is the most effective way to use coaching? And I know you shared about succession planning, and that's really important. We'll talk about that on the ROI. But, how do you make coaching, part of the culture? How do you integrate it in an organization?
I completely agree with you. There's a lot of reticence among leaders to spend those, dollars when it's only impacting a single person, and compared to spending the same dollars, you could probably cover off 40, 50 people. And I think companies will continue to do both. So, I do think visibility is also important. So I think people will continue to, invest in the visible stamp, based programs that, show that we're caring and we're developing. But what I found personally really effective is, we talked about the concept of a sponsor earlier. Right. So I found it very effective to use sponsors in the organization to push the idea of coaching. And HR alone cannot do that. And, a manager, kind of for a single team cannot do that. So I think we've got to have sponsors at the highest levels. And, even if you look CEO down, they've all had coaches at some point, and I think that's where we have to tap in the sponsorship. And to show that value. And one or two areas I've seen immediate value, and I've seen a lot come out of it is, when we talk about our really topmost leaders and, we look at their succession bench, what I've found is, over a multi-year period, when you look at, you always say, is somebody ready 3 to 5 years, or is somebody ready 1 to 2, or is somebody ready now? And when you actually quantify what your succession bench looks like, and if it's empty and, if it's weak, I've found, we've seen in, I think 3 organizations I worked in, shown results of moving that, trajectory much faster along. So that has been tangible, as an outcome. And I've seen this happen, last to last organization, as well as my last and in my current, where we started a talent review and, we've ended with a, kind of red on that succession. And, 18 months down, we're at an amber or we're at a green because the very same individuals have progressed faster down. But I also at the same time agree with Parul's point of view. I don't think we should overkill the kind of, the financial aspect of it. I think that's an overkill. We don't need to invest that much time really justifying it. I think if we use sponsors the right way, and we show some of these examples within an organization where it's worked, I think that really helps move the needle. The second thing I have seen being used effectively is also, pulse surveys. So, there's always a section on manager effectiveness, always, I like my manager, I want to work with my manager, I trust my manager. And that's something that has the eye of, the more senior executive level leadership. They always look at pulse survey results and they'll always see what the sentiment is. And, is it a net positive? Is it a net negative? And we actually, pulse every quarter. It's all online and it's instantaneous. So, you can automatically see the sentiment move from negative to positive even quicker, probably over 2 quarters and 3 quarters when the topmost leader of their teams had coaching. And I think just, maybe these are the 2-3 examples where, if one can share that a bit wider and, get a lot more sponsorship around it, I think that helps.
Fantastic. Thanks, Praneet, and thanks for your input, that you see the results in different ways. It might be the pulse survey. It could be, feedback that's captured in different ways. But I see a lot of organizations going to that, the flash up. What do you think of this? How's your manager on? Why? How's the environment? These pulse surveys are gaining traction. I'm going to come back to that a bit though on the ROI point, because there's a question you might want to just look from Sharon, which is for you. So we'll come back to that later, Praneet. I'm going to go to Parul, who was almost like banging the table saying, let's not go for the tangible, quantifiable figures. So just tell us more about that, Parul. What's your perspective?
So in my view, I know that there is a saying, what gets measured gets done and things like that. But firmly, I believe with respect to coaching, the organization has to be prepared, if they are sponsoring a coaching program, to just let go their feeling or wanting to control what goes on, and what the person's learning and their own individual journey. I think there is a need to just let go wanting to control that bit. The moment either the sponsor or the leadership team agrees that it is time for an individual to work through with somebody independently, and we don't know what that conversation is about, and have the faith that it is working and it will work. And if you expose a pool of people who and anyways, I think the organization should be a great place to work at, etc. If those things are all in place, having a coach or the budget assigned for any coaching related, I don't think it should even be a question. In my mind, it is the element of wanting to see results every quarter, wanting to see numbers is what is driving this. I think when an individual focuses on changing something about themselves, and it has to be a sustained change, then those things take time. And I believe one must give the time on whatever theme the person chooses to bring up. Ultimately, it will reflect in a great person working, a very motivated, great person working within your organization. And slowly, depending on the theme they choose, it will also reflect in the people he or she touches and interacts with, and builds a team around, and even attracts in their team. So for me, for example, if I plan to move jobs, it will be very, very important for me to know informally, through my network, what is the culture within the organization? How do they sponsor coaching? Do they, and what does the leadership team, what is, I mean, is it just numbers? Are they interested in the person? And I think for me, an organization which invests in coaching is giving a very different message. I think, at least for me, it'll be a place I would want to work in. It'll be a place where I know there is a human element to what we all bring to an organization. And if you have a motivated person, then I don't know, it just feels to me as something which it can't be quantified at all. I don't know if I answered your question, Andrea.
Very well, yes. So this is the BD person with very strong targets saying, I don't think we can measure that. You can measure my numbers, but not if coaching is effective. So thanks for that. And you know, when you said what gets measured gets done, it reminded me of Brene Brown when she was doing her PhD, and her supervisor said, what you can measure exists. If you can't measure it, it doesn't exist, which she was shocked about, but, you know, quickly got on board. And, you know, from my perspective as a coach, I do see organizations wanting to know, how can we measure this? How can we measure the success of this engagement? So I'm just going to turn to Prasida, because, you know, you've been coached in different ways and by different people. And broadly, there's two ways, like the Parallel way is just, you know, leave them with the coach, let them get on with it. That's fine. We're showing trust. Let's trust our leader to, you know, use the coach as they need to. The other is, let's get the stakeholder feedback and input, and this is where we start, and this is what you're working on. And after 9 months, have you grown in that area? And that would be the measurement. So, you know, Prasida, from your perspective, what do you think is most effective? and are you okay? Because I can see you kind of froze a bit. Did you catch that?
Yes, I did. Okay, great. So in my opinion, it will be a little bit of a combination of both, because there will be areas at a personal level that an individual is wanting to address or work around. And I think there has to be that flexibility and space for the individual to identify some of those areas. Like, you know, Parul was giving the example about balance. Now, if you were to think about balance, it totally depends on whether the company is also as invested, and does the company care enough about that aspect. And if yes, then, you know, that will work well for both the individual as well as the organization. But there could be other areas that an individual chooses which might not work or fit into the larger goals of the organization, as they look at you as a resource, as a leader. They're trying to grow and you know, build into somebody or taking a larger role in future. So there will have to be some areas which is a lot more focused on what the individual's own development goals are, and areas where he or she thinks he or she needs help. And then, of course, the other aspect of it could be some of the areas identified by the organization. For example, to Praneeth's example, if it's about succession planning, then, you know, there will be some of the areas which the manager would have identified for this individual to step up and step into his or her role. Or, for example, in my personal case, back in the day, I was moving into a larger role. It was a switch. I hadn't spent enough time in the organization before situations led to me getting a larger role, and I needed that help and support to understand the organization's culture and expectations, as well as the larger universe around which you know, some of us were operating. So I think that balance was very important for me to strike as I kind of worked on my role, and for the organization as well, so that balance is maintained. Additionally, I think, you know, some of the things that Parul had mentioned in the past, you can also measure or look at how well this relationship is working based on the way an individual is working with their teams. You know, NPS, for example, of the team, shared goals, and how individuals are working towards those. Manager effectiveness is one side of it, but also as individuals, when you look at 360-degree reviews and things like that, all of that kind of also helps add on to see how well this relationship is working. while there are very clear defined individual level goals as well as organizational level goals, which are a lot more aligned with your progression in the company itself versus your progress as an individual and as a professional.
Thanks, Prasida. Thanks a lot for that perspective. I know we've got about 10 minutes now for the Q&A. So there's, I know Praneet talked to this a bit earlier, but it's kind of the ROI of coaching at different levels of the organization. So you gave really nice examples there. I mean, when do you start investing in coaching, Praneet, and when do you advise that? Is there any perspective there to Sharon's question?
Yeah, I think for me, transitions are the important part. So, transitions, and, I like Sharon's point about, maternity returns. That's something, we don't talk about consciously, but I think transitions, so whether you've got, a life stage change or, you're doing a succession planning, you've got your talent pool, you got to get them, ready to move up. I think that's a very tangible return. The maternity one's tangible too, because I think we've got to, as leaders, focus on retaining our women in the workforce. And, it's known that we do lose them out, during life stage transitions. So I think there's a good case for that. There's a good case on succession, because what I've used, and I know somebody asked the question, what do you tell a stakeholder who's not convinced? And something I've used often, and I've always faced the resistance, I have to say it's not uncommon, is, start small, start with the leader himself who's being resistant, and get either them to, sign up and say, would you like to try this and, have a look and, try that. Or what I've found even more effective is the leader always needs to have a successor. And I've always said, you're not a good leader if you don't have a successor, and if you're not building one. So I think that's the kind of reverse pressure, that sometimes works, and get them to start small by choosing their successor and say, pick one person in your team, let's try it out and let's see what they have to say, and, kind of move there. Or, pick some other sponsor who's done it elsewhere in the organization who can share their feedback. So I think that's the other one. The third one I found very effective is during change. A lot of, and I'm sure all of you on the call have faced this, but restructuring, it happens every 6 to 8 months. Now it doesn't happen every 3 years like it used to. And it doesn't even happen every 2 years like it used to. And what I'm finding is roles are getting clubbed a lot. So, people at mid and senior levels are needing to do the job of 2 and 3 and 4 people sometimes. And I think that's a really important point when it comes to the case for investing in coaching, because that leader or that person cannot do the job like the other 3 people were doing before. They've got to pivot. And if they don't, the organization will lose that leader. And, if we don't help, those people be effective in a restructuring, all of the benefits that finance put in their spreadsheets around, we've saved so much headcount, those all go spiraling out of control. If you lose that one person you're relying on to do the job of 3 people, you just got rid of. And if one then, has to bring in someone new, it's going to take 12 months to bring them back on track. So I think those are some arguments that can help. They've helped me. And yes, people are a bit tight when it comes to cost and letting go. And I think to the question of, how do you even put it into a budget, I would also say maybe not at first, maybe just use the training budget. And that's how I've kind of always, told the leaders, I'm like, you always have a training budget. Can you just give me 5% of it to experiment? And, trust us. We are, professionals in the field. Trust us with 5%, and then, help them grow it the next year and the next year and or the next quarter, have that added back in. So I think those 2-3 transition points are the most important, I think, when it comes to investing in coaching.
Okay, thanks. Praneet, you've kind of had a masterclass on persuasion there from Praneet, how to persuade in the organization. And I know, Prasida, you're also, from the, the marketing perspective. So what are your top tips? If you're thinking, especially now someone said, what about in the pandemic? Is it justified to have more coaching? And you want to do that for your team. How, what are some of your influencing strategies?
I think the pandemic has definitely created additional pressures on individuals, and I also feel that it's a great opportunity. And I don't want to sound opportunistic, but it is for a lot of companies to be introduced to concepts like this. Like I do see a change, for example, in the way companies operate. Empathy today is a lot more than just a word used in certain kind of segments of the organization. It's become a lot more of a reality in the way you conduct and practice, and values have become a lot more important in the overall cultural fabric of a company versus where we were earlier, and that is because of the pandemic, and just the way human relationships have become so much more important. So I think in this larger scheme of things, I'm seeing companies open up a lot more to investing in mental health and wellness kind of courses, and enabling individuals to take their break and do something else that kind of helps them focus a lot more on their day jobs, sometimes giving them the flexibility to do their day jobs differently. So I think in all of this, there are also people at very senior levels who are facing a lot of pressure, because they are hearing from various sectors of the company about things that are happening, situations which are outside their control. Like Praneeth mentioned, I think restructuring and change, like that's become a reality. Every 6 months, you're making changes. You're grappling between decisions which are again important for the business, but might not be something that you're personally comfortable with, because these are individuals you've had a relationship with. So I feel like the environment is such that everybody is a lot more vulnerable. When you're vulnerable, you're a lot more open to seeking help and doing things differently, at least trying to do things differently. And I feel like this is a good opportunity to bring in the concept of getting a coach, whether for a peer or somebody in the team, with very clear, my business case would clearly talk about the challenges the individual is facing, things which are outside of one's control, which could be pandemic driven, or which could be as a result of something else which has happened with the individual, and things which are going to be important for us to address in the long run and make a start now. Because let's face it, there are individuals who do have time now, or who have been given the time and flexibility, but it's important to channelize them in a direction where they gain more out of it, versus kind of spend that time in some sort of speculation and kind of introspection, which is more on the negative side. So yeah, that would be my tactic.
So yeah, move forward. Yeah, the pandemic's real. How do we use it as time to support people more, and see the, I don't want to sound cliche, but the opportunity, rather than focusing overly on the uncertainty and the challenges. So thanks. And I'm going to come back to the final question to the panel that I helpfully typed into the chat. So you've got a moment to think about that, which is, what is your best advice for women to gain the highest ROI in their life? So I'm going to ask you each individually, but before that, I'm just going to come to Parul, who, has had a lot of experience of coaching, being involved in coaching programs, leading teams of over 1,000 people. So my question is, how are you paying that back? Parul, how are you bringing those skills that you've grown to support others?
So in my view, and I was introduced to coaching 10 years back. So in a sense see myself, I was lucky to get that exposure, and then I had the opportunity to sort of bring through, work through my own budget to sponsor coaching within my team, and in my way, what I think there is an element of being open to new ideas, and I think if as a leader you're open, your team sort of acknowledges that here is somebody who's open to change, here is somebody who's open to be vulnerable, as Prasida mentioned, and the only way to go from there is to grow. So in my view, I think, and I feel whatever you learn, you should talk about it. If it has touched you in a good way, you should expose your team, and you should fight for the budgets, whether it's training or otherwise, to get it to other people. Yeah. And
Carol's a fighter, right? Carol's a fighter.
yeah. You just get it done. You talk about it, and you make sure that people understand. Obviously, you have to think through and think through what concerns people may have around it. But in a sense, let it not stop you from getting something better for your teams. And I have seen, it doesn't matter whether it's a man or a woman, I've seen people flourish, my teams, and people who were a man, who were handling small teams, and it just made a huge difference for them, and I'm very happy about it. So yeah, that's me.
Okay, well, I'll come back to you in a moment. Prasida, what is your best advice for women to get the highest ROI in their lives? What's your advice? You can see what people are typing in. Quick, because I know we've come up to the time. Quick, succinct phrase.
Okay, so I think my advice is be real. My advice would be real, be vulnerable, be absolutely open to kind of situations and challenges. I think the more open-minded you are when you get into the relationship, the more you will get out of it. And I think the most important piece is to use this opportunity to get to know yourself better, because sometimes you're trying to problem solve saying, oh, I have a certain issue with a certain person, or I couldn't do this job well. But sometimes you need to take that step back and look at yourself and kind of reflect to understand what is it that is limiting you from being able to do this, or actually whether it's even limiting you, like whether if it's even as important as you're making it to be. So I think that would be my 2 cents. So
self-reflection, self-awareness, just see the bigger picture. Parol, have you had time to think about yours? Just unmute yourself. I'll just read out a few. Pretty saying, stand by your choices, surely evolve and reinvent to remain relevant. And believe in yourself, let go of any imposter syndrome, keep learning and build a strong support network, absolutely. And be self-aware, says Shraddha, and also self-accepting. That's where the real growth is. Parol, what do you say, your best return on investment for yourself?
In my mind, it would be ability to self-reflect, finding space to self-respect, not be self-critical. I think we are very easily jumping. We can be very, very self-critical. Just sit back and give yourself a smile and say to yourself, okay, what best can I do here, and get perspective from somebody independent, somebody who doesn't come with baggage, as Prasida mentioned earlier. And it usually helps. It goes a long way in getting you out of wherever you want to be out of.
So this is very wise. I know for a fact Confucius said the best form of wisdom is reflection. So 2 out of 3 have said self-reflect, take the step. Praneet, what do you say?
Grow a thick skin. That has helped me tremendously. And I think there's this word in Hindi called bindas, which is just chill out. And I think that's important for women. And I think the last one I have is, don't always assume that your mentors have to be women. Choose men also.
Yeah, don't freeze out the men. So yeah. Grow the thick skin, self-reflect, be open, ladies. And I love all your advice. I've loved having you 3 fantastic ladies here for an hour. Thank you so much for all your wisdom and insights and honesty and practicing what you preach with your authenticity and your vulnerability. So it was an absolute joy. Thank you so much. And with that, I'll say thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And lots of admiration from the panel too.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.